My name is Marissa Cole, and I was 32 the autumn my sister sold my housewarming party out from under me. I did not hear it from family. I heard it from a woman at the hardware store who congratulated me on doing such a generous thing for Leah and the baby, and then asked whether I had decided on the barbecue menu yet. I was standing in aisle 9 with a box of cabinet pulls in my hand and a contractor pencil tucked behind my ear, trying to remember whether I still needed quarter-inch anchors for the pantry shelves. I remember looking at her and smiling the automatic smile you use when you do not yet understand you have just been handed the first clean piece of evidence that your life has been discussed in rooms you were not invited into. She said, "Your mother said the shower and the welcome party are happening together at your place. Smart, really. Save money, make one day of it." Then she went back to comparing paint samples like she had not just split my September open in the middle of a fluorescent aisle. There are moments when your whole body knows before your mind is willing to. Mine did. Because the housewarming party she was talking about was for my house. The one I had spent 14 months gutting down to studs after buying it half collapsed at auction outside Marble Falls, Tennessee. The one with the leaning porch and the copper roof I could not afford and bought anyway because I was tired of always choosing the practical thing first. And my sister Leah was 7 months pregnant, unmarried, scared, and living back in my mother's spare room. What I knew, standing there under the buzzing lights with a box of cabinet pulls going slick in my hand, was that my mother had already built a bridge in her mind from those two facts. My house, my sister's need, and in my family, the distance between those two things had always been paid by whoever did not know how to say no fast enough. Welcome to the kind of story people call generosity, right up until the bill finally lands in the right mailbox. If you know what it is like to be useful long enough that people start calling it your personality, sit with me. Because what my mother did with one guest list was not the hardest part. The hardest part was the exact moment I understood I had been volunteering for this my whole life. The house sits on 6 acres just past the river road, 5 miles outside town where the pavement narrows and the mailboxes get farther apart from each other. It used to belong to a retired couple who let everything go all at once when he got sick. When I bought it at 30, the roof leaked into the back hall, the kitchen floor sagged near the sink, and there was a plum tree in the yard splitting itself open under its own weight because no one had cut it back in years. I am a finished carpenter by trade. Custom stairs, trim packages, built-ins, porch repairs, old houses mostly. I like straight lines and old wood, and the kind of silence that only happens when a room finally fits itself correctly around the people who live in it. For 14 months, I worked on that place evenings and weekends after client jobs. I stripped wallpaper, rewired 2 bedrooms, rebuilt the pantry, refinished floors on my knees, and learned exactly how much weight loneliness can carry when it thinks it is building a future. I did not do it alone, exactly. My friend Noah Mercer helped frame the back mudroom. A 24-year-old apprentice named Ivy Ross painted the upstairs windows and caulked every inch of trim without once complaining about the heat. But the heart of that house was mine. Every cabinet face, every shelf, every light fixture chosen 3 times because the first 2 were wrong. On top of the fridge, there was an envelope with $4,900 in cash folded inside it and stove written on the front in black marker. That envelope was my emergency fund, my appliance budget, and the private little promise I had made myself that at least one thing in my life would arrive new and not from somebody else's cast-offs. And for 12 years, every birthday backdrop, every baby shower setup, every church banquet centerpiece, every "can you just help for a couple hours" event in my family had come out of my truck and my time. Tables borrowed, lights strung, repairs handled, food picked up, shelves hung, doors fixed, walls painted, appliances installed, no invoice written. Not once. Which turned out to be the part that mattered most. There is a way women like me get used that does not look like being overpowered. It looks like being reliable. 2 weeks before the hardware store, my mother had me over for Sunday lunch. Darlene Cole is 63, retired from county records, and has never once in her life had a shout to rearrange a room. She does it with tone. She does it with concern. She does it by talking like whatever she wants is already halfway done, and you would embarrass yourself to object too late. My mother's table was set with cloth napkins for a lunch that should have been paper towels and soup. Leah was there, swollen feet tucked under her chair, twisting the ring she still wore though Tyler Boone had moved to Knoxville in May and stopped answering half her calls by June. My Aunt Janice was there. So was my younger brother Evan, who can look at a plate of food like it might tell him what side to take if he stares long enough. We talked about weather. We talked about nursery colors. We talked about the church roof fundraiser. Then my mother put down her fork and said, "We should combine the housewarming with Leah's shower." Not asked, said. As if this were a scheduling matter. As if the only missing piece was whether I preferred punch or lemonade. I asked what she meant by combine. She said it the way you explain a very simple idea to somebody being unnecessarily difficult. Your place is finished enough. People already want to see it. Leah needs support. We make one beautiful afternoon of it and spare everybody the expensive too. My sister started crying before anyone. Disagreed. That is important. Leah was not manipulative. Leah cried because that is what happened in our family when something had already been decided around her, and she was the last one to realize she would be used as the softest part of the argument. My Aunt Janice started talking immediately about gifts by the fireplace and maybe diapers in the front room and cupcakes on the porch if the weather held. My mother said she had already mentioned the idea to a few people and everybody loved it. That was when I understood I was not being invited into a plan. I was being informed of my role in one. I said the housewarming was mine. My mother smiled the smile she uses when other people are being sentimental about property. "Well, yes, sweetheart," she said. "And what better blessing on a home than helping family?" My brother found something fascinating in his sweet tea. Leah whispered that she did not want to be trouble. And my mother put her hand over Leah's and said the sentence that has greased more theft in my family than any lie ever could. People who have help. There it was. Not people who choose. Not people who can afford to. People who have. As if possession itself creates obligation. As if having built something automatically means surrendering it to whoever arrived empty-handed at the right moment. The invitations had already gone out. I learned that 3 days later. Not because someone told me. Because a woman from church texted asking whether she should bring a bassinet she had stored from her youngest. A bassinet. To my housewarming. I called my mother from the truck in the feed store parking lot. I asked whether she had sent invitations. She let out a small, tired breath, the one designed to make you sound rude for noticing. "Just informal ones," she said. "People need notice, Marissa." I asked how many. She said, "Around 40, maybe 50 by now." By now. Like it was a moving weather system. Like it had momentum independent of the person who started it. She had used my address, my date, my newly rebuilt house, and RSVPs were coming back to her phone. By the time I knew, women from 3 churches had already bought blankets and outfits and little stuffed animals. 2 cousins from Chattanooga had arranged to drive up together. A family friend had offered a folding gift table. Leah's former cheer coach had posted about the community rallying around one of our own. That is the trick with certain kinds of family betrayal. On paper, almost nothing changes. No lock is picked. No contract is forged. Your life is simply spoken over in enough kitchens that by the time it returns to you, it has the dull force of fact. I drove straight from town to Pine Run Events, the rental company I had booked for my housewarming tables, string lights, and the big beverage dispensers I had splurged on because for once I wanted something pretty without an emergency attached to it. Sandra Pike owns the place. 58, silver braid, practical sneakers, and the expression of a woman who has watched too many families collapse over decorative decisions to waste emotion on them anymore. She pulled my file before I got fully through my sentence. My name only. Deposit from my account in June. No second contact listed. Then she did the thing professionals do that relatives almost never do. She answered the exact question asked. "Your mother called last week," Sandra said. She wanted to increase the chair count and add gift tables. I told her I would need authorization from the client. My mother had called vendors. Plural, as it turned out. She had contacted the bakery. She had asked a church friend about balloon arches. She had told 2 neighbors parking would probably spill into the field. And every single place she had run into a locked door, she had simply gone around it by moving farther ahead with people who did not require signatures. I sat in my truck in Sandra's gravel lot and understood very clearly that on paper I still owned the whole situation. And also somehow had already lost it, because families like mine do not run on paper. They run on circulation. On who has already heard what. On how many witnesses a fiction can gather before the truth gets its boots on. I went to my mother's house that evening. Alone. That matters because women like my mother treat witnesses as disrespect. She poured coffee before I had finished taking off my shoes. She did not deny any of it. She explained it. Leah was scared. Tyler's people had gone quiet. Baby things were expensive. No one wanted Leah to feel abandoned. And my house, in my mother's mind, was not really a private possession anyway. It was an answer sitting visibly too close to a need. She told me about her own first pregnancy, how scared she was, how little people had done for her, how women remember who showed up. And then she said something that I have gone back to 100 times since because it was the first honest sentence in the whole conversation. If you make this hard, she said, people will remember that too. Not fair. Not right. Remember, that was the currency. Not whether I could afford the food or the rentals or another parade of people walking through rooms I had bled into. Only whether I was willing to pay for my place in the family with access to the house. I told her the party was supposed to be small. She said babies make things bigger. I told her I had already budgeted what I could budget. She patted my wrist and said, "Nobody's asking you to do this alone." Which sounds kind until you learn to translate it. What it meant was, other people will also use what is yours. 3 nights later she arrived at my place with a legal pad full of lists. Parking plan. Gift table placement. Paper goods. Hot food options. She walked my front porch describing where guests could set coats before I had agreed to a single thing. Noah was there, cutting trim for the laundry room. He listened quietly for 9 minutes while my mother explained how the front room would be best for presents because the natural light was better there and the baby colors would photograph softly against a pale green wall. Then he asked the simplest question in the world. Did Marissa approve any of this? My mother did not even answer him. She kept talking. That is another thing people do when they have always mistaken access for authority. They move forward fast enough that the original question begins to look rude. Noah set the trim gun down on the sawhorse and said, "Then no." Just that. No lecture. No apology varnish. No diplomatic cushion. A clean wall where she had expected a door. My mother went still for half a second, smiled, and then did what she always did when she could not directly move the woman. She shifted the problem to the man. Within 24 hours, I was not a daughter trying to preserve her first home. I was a daughter being controlled by a man who didn't understand family. Aunt Janice called to ask if Noah was possessive. My brother texted, carefully, whether everything was okay between us. A cousin sent me a screenshot of a message thread I had not been included in, where my house and my decisions were being discussed like symptoms. He's isolating her. She used to be so generous. I always worried men like that would resent strong family ties. My mother was barely in the thread at all. She did not need to be. She had already placed the first domino. That is the part people never prepare you for. Nobody fights the sentence you said. They simply move the whole trial into a room where you're not present and return with a verdict. By Friday, I had done what I always did when pressure got high. I started negotiating against myself. I wrote options on the back of an invoice pad at the kitchen counter. Half party, half shower. Smaller guest list. Potluck instead of catered lunch. Bring your own chairs. Gifts only, no games. Short event, no full house tour. If you have ever been the easy one in a family, you know this move. Give a little early, and maybe they stop there. But they never stop there. Because what they were trained to look for was not your limit. It was the absence of one. Leah found me in the parking lot of the women's clinic the next week. She was wearing sandals in cold weather because her feet did not fit anything else. She cried before she spoke. She said she had told Mom not to do this. She said she found out about the invitations after the first ones had already gone out. She said she had offered to just let church women do something in the fellowship hall. I believed her. I still do. Not everybody inside a family machine is equally guilty. Some people are grease. Some people are gears. Some people are simply soft enough to be pushed through it. She told me Tyler had sent $300 in 2 months and a text that said he was figuring things out. She told me Mom kept saying a baby only comes once. She told me she felt sick every time someone mentioned my house, like it was already hers for the afternoon. And because I had spent most of my life confusing pity with duty, I made the worst kind of offer. A generous one.
I said fine.
A combined event. Limited hours. I would cover the rentals already booked. I would not host extra people beyond the original count. No full meal. Desserts and drinks only. She cried harder. She hugged me. She called me good. And by the next Tuesday, the guest list had gone up by 27. My mother wanted hot food because pregnant women need real meals. Then she wanted a larger tent because the weather might turn. Then she wanted bathroom baskets because women notice these things. Then she asked Sandra directly whether extra chairs could be slipped in same day if a few more people came. Every time I gave 1 inch, the road moved 2 miles. It was not greed, exactly. It was stranger than greed. It was a total inability to perceive a line that had not already been defended with lumber and nails. And I had spent 12 years teaching them there was always another room in me they could use. The invoice from the rental company came in on August 11th. Revised count, 83. Additional tables, linens, serving stations, setup labor, delivery extension. Balance due in 10 days. I did the math twice at my kitchen island with a tape measure still hanging off my belt. Then I called the bakery and learned my mother had upgraded the cake. Not for me. For the baby shower. Neutral tones. Edible dried oranges, hand-painted leaves, custom topper. I asked who authorized that. The girl on the phone said, politely, your mother said she was handling all family event details. Family event. I had built the pantry shelves in that house myself 2 days earlier. The finish was not dry yet. And already the place had acquired a second legal identity inside other people's mouths. I drove to Cumberland County Credit and Loan on a Wednesday morning and opened a short-term line against my truck. $9,000. Enough to cover the overage without missing payroll for Ivy or bouncing a materials payment for a client job I was midway through. I signed papers in a chair that smelled like dust and copier toner and stared at my name at the bottom of each line until it looked like a stranger's. Then I sat in the parking lot with both hands on the wheel and did the one thing I always do before I understand my own feelings. I counted. That evening I pulled down a black tool chest from the hall closet. Inside it, under old receipts and tile samples and a dead drill battery, was a notebook. Nothing fancy. Blue cover, spiral binding, pages softened by years of truck heat. At 26 I had started writing down every unpaid job I did for family because I thought maybe someday it would help at tax time. Then I never asked anybody about tax time. But I kept writing. Doors rehung. Bathroom subfloor repaired. Mom's deck steps rebuilt. Aunt Janice's water heater install. Leah's apartment move. Brother's tuition bridge when he lost his scholarship for a
semester.
Church banquet centerpieces. Baby blankets purchased just this once. Granddad's funeral slideshow boards. The entries were practical, unadorned, and in my own handwriting. That is the terrible thing about old notebooks. They are not memory. They are evidence that you have been trying not to need. I priced it all honestly. Not inflated. Not emotional. Just labor, materials, mileage, rentals, purchases. By midnight, the total sat on my counter in black ink. $67,230. 12 years. Not one of those things had been called a loan. Not one had been framed as a debt. Every single one of them had been introduced as a small kindness in a difficult moment. And every single one had quietly hardened into precedent. The next afternoon my mother arrived with a shoebox. Inside was a photograph of herself at 20. She was standing outside the old county annex in a dress too thin for winter, pregnant with me, one hand on a rusted railing. No flowers. No party. No shower. No room full of women carrying casseroles and pastel bags. She sat at my kitchen table and told me how little she had, how nobody threw her anything, How she worked until the week before I was born and still came home to canned beans and a mattress on milk crates because nobody in her family had stepped up. Then she looked around my finished kitchen, my subway tile, my second-hand oak table, my new sink faucet still bright as a coin, and said, "Do not let your sister remember this season alone." For about 10 full seconds I saw her, not as a force, as a girl, scared, underprovided, carrying me in a body nobody had prepared her to protect. I could see, suddenly, the direct line between that photograph and the woman who believed any available thing must be surrendered to crisis because nothing had ever been kept back for her. And I almost gave it all away right there. The whole house, the afternoon, the money, the boundary, all of it. Then she ruined it with one sentence. "So please don't make this into something ugly over a party." Over a party. Not over the house. Not over the debt. Not over the public assumption. Just the packaging. That was when I understood she did not actually want recognition. She wanted continuation. And the only thing more frightening than someone who uses you on purpose is someone who thinks they are merely following the natural shape of the world. I copied the notebook pages at the library on Saturday. 11 pages. The librarian asked if I wanted them stapled. I said yes. I have thought about those staples more than I should. There is something about a stack of paper made physical that makes people like me briefly hallucinate justice. Noah came by that evening and found me at the table squaring the copies into an envelope. He asked me what outcome I thought I was buying.
Not what I wanted to say.
What I thought would happen after they heard it. I told him I wanted one clean moment where everybody could see the numbers and understand what had been spent. He leaned against the doorway for so long the room went quiet around the refrigerator motor and the click of the hall vent. Then he asked gently, "And if they understand, but still think you're wrong?" There are questions that do not feel like questions. That was one. Still, I believed in proof. I believed the problem was lack of information. That is one of the last illusions useful people lose. Sunday dinner at my mother's. 9 people. My mother, Leah, Aunt Janice, Evan, my Uncle Ron, Leah's friend Cassie, Noah, me, and my grandmother's sister Ruth, who had bad hearing and the appetite of a field hand. I waited until dishes were cleared. Then I laid the copies on the table. I read every line in the same tone I use when walking a client through a materials list. Not loud. Not theatrical. The deck steps. The emergency furnace replacement. The tuition check. The nursery dresser I refinished. The moving truck, the water heater, the loaner refrigerator, the 6 church events I supplied without charge, the repair to mom's washing machine, the porch repaint, the bathroom tile, the total, $67,230. There was silence, real silence, the kind that makes silverware sound louder just by existing nearby. And for 3 seconds, maybe 4, I thought I had finally made myself legible. Then my mother folded her napkin into a square and placed it beside her plate. And she said very softly, "So you've been keeping score." I said that was not what this was. I said it was a record, a pattern, a cost. My uncle looked at the salt shaker like it was safer than my face. Leah started crying. Aunt Janice said nobody asked me to do all that. My mother said she had not raised a daughter who itemized love. And just like that, the whole notebook turned itself inside out. Every hour I had given them became evidence, not of what I had spent, but of what kind of woman I must secretly be for having noticed. No one questioned the math. That part nearly undid me. Nobody said the numbers were wrong. The argument was not with facts. It was with the audacity of converting family mythology into arithmetic. My brother called later that night and said I had embarrassed Mom in her own home. There was real pain in his voice. That is why people like my brother are so effective. They do not perform loyalty. They sincerely mistake discomfort for injustice. By Tuesday, 2 cousins had texted, "Checking on you," in the tone people use for someone they think might be becoming unstable in public. Aunt Janice sent me a scripture about love keeping no record of wrongs. No one asked who paid for what. Not one person. That was the night I learned a number is not always evidence. Sometimes it is only a spotlight, and the first person people blame is whoever turned it on. 3 days later, the story in circulation was that I might cancel everything out of spite. My mother never said that to me directly. She said it to others and let it travel. That is another elegant cruelty. Never own the blade. Just keep handing it to people who already think they are protecting something sacred. I could have canceled. Legally. Easily. The rentals were in my name. The house was mine. My labor was mine. The front gate could have stayed shut. And for one full night the possibility felt good. I stood in the pantry I had built myself and imagined the calls, the confusion, the embarrassment, the reversal. I imagined my mother having to explain to 80 people why there was nowhere to park and no cake and no shower and no access to the soft, lovely afternoon she had already promised on my behalf. That warm feeling in my chest scared me more than anything else in the story up to then, because it felt familiar. Not from me. From her. Control the room. Control the terms. Control the memory others are allowed to walk away with. I sat on the back steps with Noah that night while the porch light drew moths out of the dark. He priced out the loss on the back of a lumber receipt the way he prices jobs. What had already been spent. What could still be stopped. What each decision would cost in money and what it would buy in peace. Then he asked whether I wanted the event or whether I wanted to win. He said we could not afford both. That is one of the most adult sentences anyone has ever given me. We were quiet a long time after that. Then he held out his phone. On the screen was a listing for 3 nights at a small lodge outside Blue Ridge, Georgia.
Cabin.
Lake access. October discount. No one knows us there, he said. You could have your house and still not spend the day inside this. He did not say run. He did not say heal. He offered logistics. Some forms of love arrive as a materials estimate. I sat there looking at that small rented cabin for a long time. Then I got up, walked through every room of my own house in the dark, and understood exactly what I was going to do. I was not going to take the day back. I was going to give it away completely. The next morning I drove to Sandra Pike's office before she opened. We sat with coffee at her metal desk among stacked folding chairs and linen sample binders. I asked what it would take to transfer every rental order and vendor coordination piece to Leah. She pulled the contract. There was an assignment clause. Of course there was. Client transfer with written consent, updated responsibility terms, and a processing fee. Once transferred, Sandra explained, I would no longer be host, contact, or decision maker. No say over setup. No say over guest count. No say over anything. She asked me twice whether I understood that if I did this, the event would no longer be mine in any recognizable sense. I said yes. Then I called the bakery and moved the account. Then the portable restroom vendor. Then the beverage order. Then I sat at my kitchen table and wrote one additional line on the transfer form in my own hand beneath the signatures. No reimbursement. No reversal. No repeat. Sandra initialed it. That mattered to me more than the legal force of it. I needed the sentence to exist somewhere outside my body. I met Leah at the diner off Highway 11. Not my mother.
Leah.
She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. I slid the paperwork across the table. I told her the event could be hers completely. At my house.
She asked.
No, I said. Not at my house. I had already made the second arrangement. I had called Hearthstone Hall, a church-owned gathering space 8 minutes from town, plain but clean, available that date because a quilting retreat had moved locations last minute. I paid the deposit. I transferred the rental package there instead. Smaller setup, reduced food, no house tour because there was no house involved. Enough for a decent event, respectable and functional and fully hers. My mother had wanted my home because she wanted the appearance of abundance. What I handed over instead was shelter, a room,
a date,
a chance. Not my life. Leah stared at me so hard I could see the exact second she understood both the gift and the boundary inside it. She cried, again but differently this time. Not helplessly, like someone who has been given something she cannot pretend not to recognize. I told her the day was hers if she wanted it. But if Mom tried this with me again, in any form, the answer would be no before it became a plan. Leah signed, quietly, hands shaking. Just her. Not my mother. That mattered too. What my mother did when she found out was drive to my place and stand on my unfinished back step with both hands clenched around her purse strap like she was holding herself together by force. She said I had humiliated her. She said people were expecting my home. She said Hearthstone Hall was fine in the way people say fine when they mean socially survivable but aesthetically disappointing. She said I was punishing Leah for being vulnerable. I said no. I said I was ending a habit. She wanted to know what number would fix it. That was the moment. Standing in my gravel drive beside the stack of salvaged porch balusters I had not yet painted, my mother asked what it would take. Not emotionally.
Practically.
As if every fracture in the world could be priced if you kept the tone calm enough. And suddenly I saw it. Her whole language. Need, debt, sacrifice, access, loyalty, shame. Every relationship balanced like a ledger nobody was allowed to mention out loud. I told her there was no number. That was when she got loud. She said I had become cold. She said homeownership had changed me. She said I was acting rich on a carpenter's income and mean on a daughter's heart. She said one day I would need family too. I said maybe. Then I told her something I had never said to her in my entire adult life. I am not available for this anymore. Not angry. Not theatrical. Just final. She stared at me like I had started speaking a language she was not raised to hear. Then she got in her car and left hard enough to throw gravel into the weeds. By the fence. The event happened on September 21st. At Hearthstone Hall. Not my house. I did not attend. Noah and I drove to Blue Ridge the night before in his truck with a cooler in the back and sawdust still on the floor mats. The cabin was small, the coffee terrible, the lake colder than it looked, and I slept the first full night I had slept in 6 weeks. At 3:14 that afternoon my phone started lighting up. Missed call from Mom. Text from Evan. Voicemail from Aunt Janice. A cousin I never talked to sent, "Call me when you can." I did not answer until evening. The story came in pieces. Leah's friend Cassie had thanked everyone who made this happen, and an older woman from church had asked, lightly, "And when do we get to see Marissa's beautiful house?" Before my mother could redirect, Leah had said, in front of 70 people and a dessert table and a whole room primed for polite fiction, "This is a Marissa's party." She gave up her own plans so I could have this one. Then, because truth has a way of entering rooms sideways, Ruth, hard of hearing, sharp as broken glass when she wanted to be, had added, loudly enough for half the room, "Well, it's about time somebody thanked that girl properly." People started asking questions. Simple ones. The dangerous kind. Did Marissa pay for this? Was the housewarming canceled? Why isn't she here? My mother could, apparently, survive conflict. What she could not survive was unscripted curiosity from an audience. She called me furious. Not because the day had failed. By all accounts it was lovely. Plates full, gifts stacked, Leah smiling, everyone fed. No, she called because the story had escaped her hands. "You made me look selfish," she said. And there it was. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "This got out of hand." Only the image. Always the image. I stood on a cabin porch in another state with wet hair and a mug of terrible coffee and listened until she ran out. Then I said goodnight. She kept talking. I hung up. It was the first truly clean ending I had ever made with her. No defense. No appeal. No counter-evidence. Just an ending. 9 months later, the house is finished. Mostly. The porch swing still needs chain covers, and the hall closet door sticks in humid weather, but the plum tree was pruned in February and bloomed like it meant it this spring. Ivy still works with me 3 days a week and starts trade school in September. There is a laminated rates sheet above my workbench now. Labor, materials, mileage, rush fees, weekend call-out. And at the bottom, family rate, quoted in writing, approved before work begins. People sign it. Do you know what is almost funny? That was all it ever took. Not a sermon. Not a fight. Not a different personality. Just a line where the arrangement had to become visible before it could proceed. Leah sends photos of the baby. Sometimes she asks what color to paint a shelf or whether a crib bolt looks stripped, and I answer her like I would answer any woman trying to keep a house together on too little sleep. My mother tells a version of last September in which she was trying to help and I turned cruel and selfish over a venue. Some relatives believe her. Some do not. My brother calls on holidays and talks about weather and truck tires and anything except the exact shape of the crack in the family floor. I have decided I can live inside that. In March, my cousin Hannah called me from a grocery store parking lot crying because my aunt had volunteered her spare room to host visiting relatives for Easter without asking. She said, "I didn't know I was allowed to say no after people already knew." I told her you are allowed to say no before they know. You are allowed to say no after they know. You are allowed to say no even if they are disappointed. Especially then. There was a long quiet on the line. Then she laughed a little and said, "Nobody told me that." I know. Nobody told me either. I had to buy the lesson myself. It cost me a party, a season, a clean version of my mother, and whatever fantasy I was still carrying that evidence alone could save a relationship people preferred in its blurry form. But the house is mine. That sentence means more than square footage now. It means the front gate. It means the guest list. It means the key in the lock. It means the afternoon belongs to the person who built the room. If you are the one your family calls first because you always figure it out, do one thing for yourself that has nothing to do with anger and everything to do with clarity. Write down what it has cost. Not to shame anybody, not even to show them, just to see it once in your own handwriting. Because some of us do not understand what has been happening until the pattern stops sounding like love and starts reading like rent. And a home you keep paying for without ever getting to live in is not a home. It is a debt dressed up in family language. That is my story. One guest list. One transfer form. One house I finally kept.